Spartan Zero. The ghost in the code was never supposed to exist. Prologue. Ghost signal location. Epsilon Halo, debris field. 17B time, ZO346-12, Zulu mission. Status, search and recovery, UNSC recon team. Sigma, the derelict Pelican hung in space. Like a crucified corpse, its fuselage torn open. Wires and oxygen hoses writhing in zero gravity like exposed veins. Plasma burns lined the hull. No transponder. No black box ping. Just a looped, ancient distress signal stuttering out every 27 seconds in a dead dialect of UNSC code. Sergeant M. Ortiz floated forward in EVA gear, helmet HUD flickering as it tried to translate the signal. Sierra. Zero. Execute protocol. The mission is not complete. His stomach twisted. That call sign hadn't been used in decades. It wasn't even in the modern Spartan registry. He turned to his tech specialist. Can you clean that up? Trying. This coding style's ancient. It's pre-Spartan-II, pre-Cortana. Wait, hold up. The tech froze. Her visor lit up with new data. Sir, there's someone on board. Ortiz's blood ran cold. Alive. Not sure. I'm getting the biosigns. 1. Faint, but strong. She looked up. And sir, he's moving. They breached the craft with slow precision. The interior was a graveyard. Walls scorched, seats melted, dried blood floating like red smoke in the weightless dark. Then from deeper inside, a sound, metal, dragging against metal. Ortiz raised his rifle. Come out slowly, hands where I can see them. Silence, then movement. A massive figure stepped out of the shadows, not in standard Mjolnir armor. This was older, bulky, modified with jagged Forerunner tech like someone had welded ancient weaponry onto a prototype Spartan frame. The armor hissed and flexed with each step. Its visor was cracked, blood-stained, and it bore a nameplate long since thought erased. Spartan 000, no words, no salute. The figure just tilted its head and whispered, Are you with her? With Halsey? Ortiz hesitated. She's dead. A pause. Then a faint tremor in the void. No, she's calling me. The mission isn't over. The Spartan raised a weapon unlike anything they had ever seen, and the world went white. Chapter 1. The First Sinoni Research Facility. 34T-X. The Nest. Planet Onyx. March 21st, 2510-02-19. Zulu it began, as most sins do, in silence. Not the kind of silence found in nature or the reverent hush of a cathedral, but the sterile stillness of a place engineered to hide what should never have existed, buried beneath kilometers of reinforced alloy and Forerunner stone, hidden from every map and mind. ONI Facility 314X pulsed with a quiet hum that only the guilty could hear. They called it the Nest. In a chamber just off the central lab, 12 figures in dark uniforms stood behind reinforced glass, staring into a vertical containment tank lit by an eerie blue glow. Suspended in fluid was a child, a boy no more than 8, motionless save for the occasional twitch of a finger or eyelid. Wires trailed from his spine, his skull, his chest. Medical instruments blinked with unreadable data. The fluid shimmered softly, almost hypnotically, like the surface of a long-forgotten lake. Vitals are steady, murmured Dr. Mara Ellison, her eyes flicking across her display. Neural patterns are elevated. He's dreaming again. Behind her, a figure entered the room. Unnoticed at first, until the technicians instinctively straightened. Dr. Catherine Halsey. She was young then, not yet the specter she would become, but her presence had gravity. She moved with quiet precision, a datapad in hand, her gaze locked on the boy beyond the glass. Bring him out, she said. Ellison hesitated. Dr. Halsey, protocol requires... That's protocol for Spartans. This, Halsey said coolly, is not a Spartan. The room fell silent again, save for the beeping monitors and the sound of a technician entering the override code. With a hiss and a groan, The capsule began to drain. The viscous fluid slipped away, revealing pale skin, surgical scars, a child's frame reshaped by science, and something far older. The boy's body sagged forward, caught by the mechanical harness waiting beneath him. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He opened his eyes like burning ice, and stared directly at Halsey. Then he smiled. They dressed him in a gray bodysuit and brought him to one of the interview chambers. One table, one chair, 2 armed guards. No windows. The boy sat quietly, legs swinging off the edge of the chair. He studied his fingers, watching how they moved, how they bent and stretched as though seeing them for the first time. The door opened with a hiss. Halsey stepped inside and sat across from him. She set the data pad on the table, but he didn't. "Look up." "Not yet." "What's your name?" she asked. The boy tilted his head, blinking slowly. "I don't know," he said. "Do I need one? You used to have a number before we upgraded you." His voice was steady. "Numbers get replaced. I don't want to be replaced." "You won't be." She paused. "You're the only one." She slid the pad across the table. Images flashed. Burning cities, Covenant cruisers blotting out the sky, fields of glassed earth stretching to the horizon. "This is what's coming," she said. "We created you to survive it." "To kill," he corrected. "No." Her voice softened just slightly. "To survive." He looked at her now, really looked. His stare was too sharp for his age and a scalpel behind young eyes. "I remember things," he said. "Not mine. Other people's. Their voices, screaming, dying. It's residual imprinting. Memory bleed from the prototype neural grafts. It'll pass." "Good," the boy said. "I don't want to feel them." Halsey leaned forward. "Do you know what your mission is?" He blinked once, twice. Then, calmly, he said, "Yes, I remember now." In a chamber above the lab, behind triple-layered glass and 2 armed sentries, an Oni commander watched the feed with a clenched jaw. "You're playing God," he said. Halsey didn't look at him. "God made humanity flawed. I'm just correcting. The blueprint. He's too unstable. Look at his aggression patterns. His empathy register is almost non-existent. That's why he'll survive." She turned to the screen as the boy smiled again, unaware or unconcerned that he was being watched. "Or burn out," the commander said. "All things burn," Halsey said, her voice quiet. "But some are meant to light the way." That night, the boy lay in his assigned bunk. Not a room, not yet. No toys, no books, just a bed, 4 walls, and a single dim light. His gaze lingered on the ceiling, unmoving, unblinking. Then he whispered into the dark, "Am I real?" For a moment, nothing. Then, from deep within his mind, a voice not his own, cold, metallic, ancient. "You are the beginning." The boy smiled, and the lights flickered. Chapter 2. The Test Location. Designated Training Zone 9. Planet Onyx Subsurface Environment. Date, March 28, 2510. Time, 1845 Zulu. The drop cage hissed open. Zero stepped out into darkness, a jagged cavern lit only by emergency strobes. Embedded in the walls, the air was thick with humidity and the distant scent of burned metal. Echoes bounced off unseen walls, distorted and wet. Above him, through layers of rock and alloy, a dozen Oni officials watched from a hidden control room. "This is it," one muttered. "Let's see what the freak can do." Halsey said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. Inside the cave, Zero didn't hesitate. His feet moved before the command even came through. His body was learning faster than the training could keep up. The voice in his earpiece crackled to life. "Begin simulation. Hostile assets inbound. Objective: neutralize all targets. No support. No extraction." There was no acknowledgement. Zero simply walked. The first contact came fast. A metal clang. Movement behind the stalagmites. Then something lunged. A fully armed UNSC combat drone painted in Covenant purple, shaped like a Sanghili. It roared with pre-programmed fury, plasma blades igniting from its arms. Zero didn't flinch. He moved sideways, low, fast, too fast. The drone swiped where he'd been a millisecond earlier. He was already behind it, fingers curling into the seam of its armor, and, crack, one movement. One sound, the drone's neck twisted violently to the side. A hydraulic hiss, sparks, collapse. Dead. Again he didn't stop. More came. 6 drones, then 10, then 20. They attacked in formation, flanking with simulated tactics Oni had pulled. From Covenant war recordings. A normal Spartan wouldn't have survived. Zero didn't just survive, and he dismantled them. He moved like liquid violence. Graceful, terrifying. Every strike was fatal. Every step had intent. He didn't use cover. He didn't need it. He was the weapon. And somewhere between the kills he began to hum. A melody with no words, no name. It came from deep inside. A lullaby stitched together from the dying fragments of other people's memories. And still, he smiled. Up in the control room, the mood had shifted. "He's enjoying this," one of the scientists whispered. "His adrenaline's barely registering," said another. "It's like, this is calming to him." The Oni commander leaned in. "What happens when we tell him to stop?" Halsey didn't answer. In the cave, Zero paused. The final wave was coming. 30 drones, advanced models, programmed with Oni counter-tactics. The lights dimmed further. Something new slithered in the dark. A prototype hunter-class automaton, 6 meters tall, humming with plasma coils. His heart rate didn't change. But the voice came again, the one inside, colder than the rest. "No more tests. This is the lesson." Zero stepped forward, and the walls themselves began to scream. 12 minutes later, the lights came back on. Every drone lay in pieces, some crushed, some still sparking. The cavern floor was scorched, marked by burn lines and ruptured plating. The center stood Zero, motionless. His suit was torn, blood, not his, stained his face and chest. His eyes blinked slowly as if returning from a dream. He turned toward the closest camera and said nothing. Up above, the silence was absolute. The Oni commander was the first to speak. He didn't follow the engagement protocols. He tore through the reinforced drones. He melted the hunter's core with his bare hands. He wasn't supposed to do that. He adapted, Halsey said. He disobeyed. No, she corrected. Quietly. He evolved. Later, they brought Zero back to his chamber. They tried to scan him. He refused. They tried to sedate him. The needle bent. Eventually, he sat alone again, cross-legged in the center of his room, staring at nothing. In his mind, the voice returned. "Now they know what you are." He smiled again, this time wider, and whispered to the empty room, "It's not over yet." Chapter 2. The Testoni Research Facility, 314X. The Nest, Planet Onyx, Subsurface Training Zone, 9 March 28, 2510, 1845. Zulu. The drop cage hissed open with a release of vapor and chilled hydraulic steam, like the exhale of something long dead. Inside the cage, bathed in dim red lighting, stood the boy they called Zero. He didn't flinch as the light shifted. His bare feet met the cold ferrocrete of the cavern floor with deliberate weight. No armor, no weapon, just the sleek gray bodysuit stitched into his skin like it had grown there. Ahead of him stretched the vast underworld of Training Zone 9, a simulation chamber the size of a small city, modeled loosely after Covenant architecture. Winding. Pathways, vertical shafts, angular terrain, and thick fog hugging the ground like smoke clinging to fire. Somewhere in that fog, they waited. He could smell the ozone already, could feel the vibrations, could taste the electricity in the air. "Spartan Candidate Zero," came the voice in his earpiece, initiating live combat scenario. No support, no communication. Terminate all hostiles. Begin. He stepped forward. High, above him, buried in the skin of the planet, a dozen eyes watched from behind thick layers of glass and sensor screens. "Phase 1 deployed," said one technician, adjusting the filters. "Vital signs are green. Cortisol baseline holding. Neural. Activities off the chart. Only Commander Eamon Red folded his arms and stared down at the screen. He's too calm. That's not calm, murmured Dr. Mara Ellison, watching Zero's heartbeat. That's focus. Beside her, Dr. Catherine Halsey said nothing. She simply watched. Not like a scientist, not like a commander. She watched like an architect admiring a cathedral before its first storm. In the training zone, the fog stirred. They came without warning. The first wave, 6 combat drones painted, Covenant colors, dropped from the ceiling in perfect synchronization, plasma blades igniting with a shriek. Their movements were precise, fast, meant to overwhelm. Each drone had the processing speed of a small AI and the kill order of a Sangheili zealot. Zero didn't blink. He ducked under the first blade, twisted past the second, and drove his knee into the chest of the third drone midair. A sickening crunch of reinforced metal. It hit the wall and didn't get back up. The others closed in, but he was already moving, slipping through them like a whisper in smoke. One elbow shattered a faceplate, one arm hooked a blade and twisted it into another's chassis. 2 seconds later, 6 drones lay scattered across the ground like broken statues. Zero stood among them, breathing evenly. No scratches, no burns. He tilted his head upward, toward the camera watching him. Then he kept walking. He dispatched the entire first wave in 5.4 seconds. He's not following the preset combat formations we trained into him. That's because he's not following anything, Red snapped. He's rewriting the script as he moves. Halsey nodded almost to herself. Good. The second wave was worse. 24 drones dropped from hidden compartments in the ceiling and walls, surrounding him in a spiral. Their weapons were upgraded. Shock batons, spike cannons, concussive shells. They opened fire in unison. The cavern lit up with muzzle flashes and plasma arcs. Zero moved. Not away, not behind cover. Into them. His body seemed to fold into angles that shouldn't exist. A blur of elbows, knees, fists. He used one. Drone as a shield, then vaulted over it and ripped a cannon arm from another mid-shot. The spike rounds punched through 2 more enemies behind it. He caught a baton strike, twisted it back, and crushed the attacker's leg at the joint. The scream from its speaker was cut short by a boot through the chest. Blood sprayed, synthetic, bright violet, and hissed as it hit the floor. Then he roared. The sound echoed through the cavern, animalistic and wrong. In the control room, half the staff flinched. His combat instincts are exceeding modeled predictions, Ellison said. Quickly, fingers flying over her console. Adrenaline spiking now. Not fear, not stress, joy. You're saying he likes this? Red said, staring at the screen in disbelief. No, Halsey said, still calm. I'm saying he's awake now. 10 minutes passed. 29. Kills, no wounds. He didn't just eliminate. He dominated. He played with their patterns, anticipated them, evolved faster than the AI inside the drones could adapt. He moved like a ghost, like an echo of violence etched into time. Then the walls of the simulation chamber shifted, and the Hunter-class automaton dropped into the center of the arena, 7 meters tall, built from the remains of real Lekgolo colony armor, enhanced with Oni gravtech and experimental plasma arrays. It bellowed as it landed, splitting the stone floor beneath it. Zero didn't stop walking. In the control room, alarms began to flash. He's not equipped to handle that alone, someone shouted. He doesn't need to be, Halsey murmured. The hunter charged. Zero ran toward it. The impact shook the cavern. Plasma fire ripped through the air. Zero dodged, leapt onto its arm, sprinted up the barrel of its cannon, and drove his hand into the weak joint of its shoulder. He didn't have a blade, so he used his fingers. The machine shrieked. Sparks exploded. Then the entire upper torso detonated in a burst of unstable plasma. When the smoke cleared, Zero was standing behind it. Alive. His hand was blackened, bones visibly cracked beneath the skin. He didn't care. He raised his head, looked into the nearest camera, and said, "Is that all?" Silence in the control room. No one moved, no one spoke, except Halsey, who smiled. Get him out of there. Red ordered quietly. Now. Back in his chamber, Zero sat cross-legged in the center of the floor. The medics hadn't dared to sedate him. The pain in his hand had already stopped. His bones were mending. Fast. Too fast. He stared at the far wall, unblinking, and whispered almost thoughtfully, "They're not ready for me." Then the voice inside answered. The one that wasn't his. The one that lived in the cracks of his mind, where Forerunner code and human synapse blurred. They never will be. And somewhere on the far side of the planet, a Covenant probe picked up a whisper it shouldn't have. A name, a frequency, a ghost, waking. Chapter 3. Ghosts of Erish Location. Erish 5. Outer Colonies. Date: April 12, 2510. Time: Oro 422 Zulu. Operation Black Fog. The dropship sliced through low orbit like a silver fang, its hull scorched, blackened by entry. Inside, the cabin pulsed with red light and engine rumble. Buckled into a solitary seat at the rear, Zero stared through the reinforced viewport as the broken world of Erish 5 came into focus. It looked dead, but Oni didn't send him for the dead. They sent him for what survived. Erish 5 had been glassed by the Covenant 4 months ago. A late retaliation strike after rebel resistance in the system. Entire cities were turned to obsidian. What little remained was infested. Kigyar scavenger packs, lingering Ungoi colonies, and something new, something deeper. Oni's initial recon team had vanished 36 hours ago. Not killed. Vanished. So now they sent Zero, not as a rescue, as a test. As the dropship descended, turbulence slammed into the hull. Flames licked the side windows. Below, glassed. Terrain shimmered under cold starlight, ridged, cracked, and unnatural, like a world frozen mid-scream. The pilot's voice crackled over comms. "Touchdown in 2, sensors still dead. No thermal, no life signs. Are you sure you want to?" "He's not listening," muttered the co-pilot. They weren't wrong. Zero stood. Before the ramp even dropped, he was walking. 400 hours, drop zone, Sector 3, Erish. The ground crunched beneath his boots. Broken ash, melted steel, bones half buried in obsidian. A wind moaned through the skeletal remains of what used to be New Halrab, once home to 300,000 colonists. Now just dust and shadows. Zero moved like a ghost, no footprints, no sound. He didn't need maps, he felt where to go, downward into the ruins. The first contact came by scent, burnt ozone, rotting meat. Not human. He followed it into a shattered rail tunnel 5 stories below the surface. Dripping walls. Feral darkness. Something moved ahead. Fast, scuttling. Kigyar, armed with modified needlers, low to the ground, whispering. In clicks, they never saw him coming. One moment they were alive, the next, nothing. He left no bodies. Just blood and silence. Deeper still, heat signatures flickered faintly on his HUD. Not Kigyar. Human barely. He stepped through a bent blast door into what had once been an underground station, now a makeshift bunker. Fluorescent lights flickered. Walls stained with desperation. 4 survivors, 2 Marines, 1 Oni tech, and a Spartan-Zero stopped cold. She turned toward him. Her armor was different, heavier, greener. Mark IV Mjolnir, scratched and scorched from hard fighting. Helmet tucked under one arm. Blonde hair matted to her skull. Eyes sharp, calculating. Tag. RD-0A7 Kelly. "What the hell?" one Marine muttered. "Is that a kid?" Zero said nothing. Kelly took 1 step forward. "Designation?" she asked. He stared at her. "Zero." Her brow twitched. "There is no Zero in the Spartan-II program." "I'm not in your program." She glanced at the Oni tech. "What the hell did you people make?" The tech swallowed. "Not made. Recovered. He's different." I noticed. They didn't have time to argue. Motion sensors lit up. Something was moving below them. Big. Not Covenant. Not wildlife. Kelly was already donning her helmet. "Whatever it is, it's coming fast." Zero tilted his head. Good. Viewpoint 31 hours. Enemy contact. The floor cracked open. A roar like twisting metal screamed through the chamber as something massive tore through the underground wall. A creature 8 feet tall, hunched and armored, biomechanical limbs twitching. With covenant wiring and flesh, not Sangheili, not brute. Something spliced, a biotech hybrid, Oni's secret fear. Prototype the Covenant never meant to leave behind. It charged. Zero leapt. The fight lasted 90 seconds. Kelly and the Marines never had the chance to move. One moment the creature lunged with a plasma spike the size of a spear. The next, Zero, was on its back, fingers buried into a neurospine, ripping out its control matrix. Blood sprayed the ceiling in a black arc. The thing screamed. Zero screamed louder, and when it fell, twitching, boiling, he didn't stop. He kept tearing, kept slamming his fists into what was left, long after it stopped moving. When he finally rose, dripping and trembling, the room was silent. Even the Spartans looked shaken. Kelly walked over. "You're not a kid," she said. "Quiet now. No. What are you?" Zero turned his head toward her, the lights flickered, and for a moment, just a second too long, his shadow stretched against the wall. Longer than it should have. "Wrong. I'm what's left when rules." "Don't work," he said. Then he turned and walked into the dark. Chapter 4. The Edge of Control, April 12th, 2510, 0720. Zulu UNSC Frigate Argent Moon Low Orbit, Eresh. The debrief room was quiet, not the sterile kind of quiet that Oni liked, but the charged, waiting kind, like the air before a storm. Spartan Kelly 087 sat at the head of the long metal table, her armor still streaked with soot and dried blood. Her helmet rested beside her, dented from the drop. Across from her, Dr. Catherine Halsey folded her hands neatly. A datapad glowed softly in front of them. Footage played on loop, grainy, brutal, raw. Zero tearing through the Covenant hybrid, like it was made of paper. Kelly broke the silence first. "You lied." Halsey didn't blink. "I didn't lie, I omitted. That thing is Oni's experiment, not a Spartan, not human." Halsey raised an eyebrow. "Neither are we, not anymore." "That thing isn't like us," Kelly snapped. "It enjoyed." Halsey watched her carefully. "And you didn't?" Kelly opened her mouth, closed it. A long pause. "That thing," she said again, softer now. "Looked at me like I was the one who didn't belong." Halsey leaned forward. "That's because he wasn't made to belong." Location: UNSC Argent Moon. Observation Deck 50 stood alone. He wasn't confined. Not exactly. Oni didn't lock him down like a prisoner, but nobody approached him. Marines gave him wide berth. Even the ship's AI wouldn't address him directly. He stood with his palms against the reinforced glass, staring out at the shattered silhouette of Eresh 5, a dead world, burned by alien fire, and somewhere in its ruins he'd woken up. He could still feel the creature's heartbeat, still feel the scream beneath his skin. He liked that feeling. That was the part that scared him. Not because it was wrong, but because it felt so right. Behind him, soft footsteps. He turned before she spoke. Kelly, no armor now, just a gray UNSC undersuit and her usual stern look. But something behind her eyes had shifted. They stood in silence a while. "You shouldn't be out here," she said eventually. Zero didn't respond. "Oni wants to disappear you." Again. They're not happy about the footage. Neither's High Command. Still no answer. "You're not going to say anything?" He turned to her. "I said everything on the ground." Kelly folded her arms. "You fought like something with nothing to lose." "I don't," he said flatly. "That's a problem." "No," he said, stepping closer. "That's why I win." She didn't flinch, but something in her posture tightened. "You scare people. I'm not for people." "Then what are you for?" A silence. Then, almost gently, "For what comes next?" Location: Oni Command Subnet. Classified Transmission Sender: Dr. Catherine Halsey. Recipient: Admiral Parangoski. Encryption level, black ice. Subject, Spartan-Zero operational status update. The events on Erish have proven two things. The subject is fully combat-capable outside simulation. Control is becoming theoretical. He's developing independent reasoning faster than expected. Emotional responses are surfacing. He is beginning to choose, and not always in accordance with orders. You will suggest termination. I advise otherwise. We do not destroy the knife because it is sharp. We sharpen it further. What comes next will not be won by soldiers. We need monsters. April 13th, 2510, 02.15 Zulu UNSC forward base. Vigil. Outer Fringe Oni wasted no time. Another operation was already underway. The Covenant had moved something to the edge of human space. A Forerunner artifact buried beneath a dead ocean on a forgotten moon. They sent 3 Spartan teams, and Zero. Not to assist, to observe, to learn, to see what the Covenant feared. But what Oni didn't understand yet, what Halsey was just beginning to suspect, was that Zero was changing. The whispers in his head were growing clearer. The voice was taking shape. And beneath the edge of his skin, something ancient was waking up. Chapter 5. Blood of the Past. April 15th, 2510, 11C Zulu UNSC forward base. Vigil. Moon of Telym 9. Outer Fringe. The shuttle's landing was soft, a ghostly descent into the ruins of the Covenant's forgotten outpost. It barely made a sound as it touched down, its engines humming low, just enough to keep the dust from settling completely. Inside the cockpit, Zero didn't move. The rest of the team did. Kelly 087 was already in her armor, tight and gleaming with the familiar sheen of the UNSC's might. She glanced back at Zero, but he didn't meet her gaze. His eyes were fixed on the faint glow of the horizon outside the viewport, a world of shattered structures, dead oceans, and ancient relics. The destination. Her HUD flashed a directive, but she didn't need it. She knew where to go. Ready for extraction? The pilot asked, voice muffled by his helmet's comm. Zero didn't respond. Kelly didn't wait. She slid the hatch open and was out before the shuttle had even powered down. The others followed. The squad was small, just 4 of them. Kelly, Zero, and 2 Marines, their weapons loaded, their gazes nervous but focused. The Marines weren't there to fight the Covenant. Not directly. They were just a buffer. They were expendable. Zero was the real weapon, and Oni had been smart enough to give him the mission. They moved through the ancient outpost, stepping carefully over broken stones and down forgotten hallways. Here, deep beneath the surface, Covenant warlords had once gathered. There were rumors of a Forerunner artifact beneath the ruins, something capable of turning the tide in the war. But the Covenant weren't interested in it anymore. It was waiting, buried and dormant, and Oni intended to wake it up. Kelly scanned the surroundings, her finger hovering near the trigger, but her eyes stayed on Zero. There was something off about him now, something alien. Every movement was precise, too calculated, too calm. The farther they ventured into the ruins, the harder it became to look at him without feeling like he was too much. The deeper they went, the less human he felt. Kelly had learned to trust. The instincts that kept her alive, but this was something new. Zero wasn't just different from the rest of them. He was becoming something else entirely. The team reached a chamber at the heart of the facility, an open hall with walls covered in ancient symbols and what looked like Forerunner glyphs. Strange. Energy pulsed in the air, vibrating the metal, and somewhere in the dark corners a soft hum echoed. Kelly raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. It was there, the artifact, a pyramid-shaped structure in the center of the room, pulsing with an eerie blue light. No larger than a crate, but undeniably powerful. The air hummed as the energy within it stirred. For a moment, it felt as though the universe itself held its breath. Zero stepped forward, and then he stopped. His eyes locked onto the artifact. The voice inside his head was louder than it had ever been. "It's here." Kelly tensed, but Zero didn't budge. His hands were by his side, unmoving. He was waiting. Then, as if responding to him, the pyramid shuddered. It opened. The floor trembled beneath their feet. From the center of the pyramid, a light erupted, so brilliant and pure it was almost unbearable. But Zero didn't flinch. The team's sensors went haywire. Static filled their comms. Kelly's HUD scrambled. "Something's wrong," she said, but her voice was drowned out by the thrumming in the air. Then Zero raised his hand, his fingers splayed, and the glow from the artifact responded, as if it were alive. The walls cracked. The ground split. An ancient pulse, forgotten and dormant, surged through the ruins. The artifact hummed louder. The world seemed to bend. Zero wasn't just standing in the chamber anymore. It felt as though he was the chamber, as if his form was melding with the ancient energy. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the brilliant blue of the artifact. His hand extended further, as if to draw more of the power into him. Kelly stepped forward, reaching for him. "Zero, get away from it!" But Zero didn't move. His voice came through their comms, calm and cold. "It's waiting for me." From somewhere in the dark, a whisper, an alien voice. A voice that was, not Zero's. "The truth lies beneath. You are the key, the first of many. You are the one who will awaken them." Before Kelly could speak, a blast echoed across the chamber. The entire room trembled. The artifact pulsed again, brighter, faster, and Zero stood at its center, arms stretched wide, as though embracing the power of the Forerunners themselves. Then, voice shattered the silence, a human voice this time, Dr. Halsey's voice. "Stop it, Zero, you're too close." But Zero didn't respond. He was no longer the boy she'd made. The ground split beneath him, revealing a long-forgotten Forerunner gateway, deep beneath the chamber, glowing with the same light. It hummed with unimaginable power, vast and ancient, as though the very core of the universe was waiting for someone to open it. Before Kelly could react, the Marines opened fire. They weren't ready. No one was ready. The blast from their rifles barely dented Zero's shields, his body moving with inhuman speed, deflecting their shots as if they were nothing. One Marine fell back, his rifle knocked out of his hands. Kelly barked into the comms. "What's happening?" But Zero was already walking toward the gateway, unlocking it step by step. The ground beneath him shook as the Forerunner technology began to come alive. And when the light exploded in the center of the room, Kelly knew this was just the beginning. See. A human voice this time, Dr. Halsey's voice. "Stop it, Zero. You're too close." Chapter 6. The Awakening, April 16th, 2510. O237. Zulu UNSC Forward Base. Vigil. Moon of Telym 9. Outer fringe, the ruins of Telym 9 had fallen silent, but the remnants of the battle were still fresh. The air felt wrong, heavy. The artifact, now dormant again, pulsed faintly beneath the shattered remains of the Forerunner gateway. But it was Zero who dominated the room now. His presence was overwhelming, filling every corner, every crack in the walls. Zero stood over the broken bodies of the Marines. One had barely managed to crawl to the door before collapsing. The other lay crumpled near the artifact, a lifeless shell of a soldier who had dared to challenge something beyond his understanding. Kelly 087 was still standing, though her knees threatened to give way. The adrenaline was starting to fade, and in its wake a deep fear grew. Fear for Zero, fear for herself, and most of all, fear for what he had become. Zero's armor was changing. The sleek surface of his Mjolnir had begun to twist. Black veins, pulsing with the same blue light as the artifact, crawled up from his shoulders to his chest, spreading down his arms and legs. The energy thrummed, alive and hungry, making the suit look more like an extension of his body, like a second skin, but alien in its design. The air around him crackled with static, and his once calm demeanor was replaced by something far more dangerous. His eyes, those human eyes, had become reflective, silvered pools that seemed to look through the world, not at it. His pulse rate had slowed to almost nothing, but his brain activity, his thoughts, were spiraling out of control. Kelly watched as he turned slowly toward her, his movements deliberate, every motion, Every step was like an echo of something much older than humanity. The artifact's power was inside him now. The Forerunners had awakened in his very mind. "What did you do?" Kelly whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. Zero didn't answer. He didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than words. He reached down, lifting a shattered chunk of the Forerunner gateway. The piece hummed in his hand, the dark veins running up his arm, pulsing in rhythm with the artifact's residual energy. Kelly raised her rifle. "Zero," she said, voice shaking. "Step away from it. You don't know what you're doing." His head tilted just slightly, and for a moment something like a smile played at the corner of his mouth. Then, in one motion, he threw the fragment at the wall, and it exploded into sparks and metal shards. Kelly's heart stopped. "It's not enough." The words came from Zero's mouth, but they weren't his. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere older. The sound was an echo, the cadence of 1,000 voices combined into one. Kelly's breath caught. The floor beneath her feet vibrated. Zero stepped forward, his movements now inexorable, like a force of nature. She could feel the weight of the energy that swirled around him, alive and restless, like it was suffocating the air. He reached out again, and the walls groaned in response. The Forerunner structures, buried deep in the core of the base, started to hum, their dormant energies waking once more. And that's when it hit her. The shift. The change. Zero wasn't just interacting with the artifact anymore. He was becoming it. Zero's voice came again. And this time it wasn't just the voice of the Forerunners speaking through him. It was his, and it was wrong. "You don't understand. None of you understand what I'm becoming, what I've seen, what I know." The words cut into Kelly like knives. "You were made to be a weapon," she said, her voice quieter now, a breath of reality. "Just like the rest of us. Don't let it take you, Zero." But Zero only smiled again. "You were wrong. I was never just a weapon." He looked at her, and this time, his eyes held a reflection she had never seen before, something alien, distant, and yet so familiar. "I'm the key." And then he shifted faster than she could follow. In an instant, he was standing by the shattered Forerunner gateway, staring down into the growing power at its core. He reached into it, as if his hands were drawn to the artifact by something beyond his control. The energy around him flared, expanding, outward in a violent burst of light, sending shockwaves through the room. Kelly was thrown to the floor, her helmet ringing with static from the violent pulses of the artifact. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the light faded. Zero stood in the center of the room, his eyes glowing with the same eerie blue light. It was done. The Forerunner gateway, once dormant, had opened. A deep, resonant hum filled the space. The walls trembled, the entire structure of the base groaning with the power that had been released. He was changing. Something ancient was now woven into his soul. And in that moment, Kelly realized that Zero was no longer a soldier. He was a harbinger. April 16th, 2510, Oro 312, Zulu UNSC Forward Base, Vigil. Moon of Telym 9 Doctor. Halsey stood at the observation window of the command center, watching the chaos unfold below. "Status?" she asked coldly. "Artifact is active," a technician said nervously. "We're losing control of the entire facility. The gateway. It's opening." "Shut it down!" Halsey barked. "Now!" But the technician only shook his head, fear spreading across his face. We can't, Dr. Halsey. The systems are offline. He's not just using it. He's becoming it." The room fell into stunned silence. Halsey turned, her eyes narrowing. "Then we don't stop him," she said. "We contain him." Chapter 7. The Fall, April 16th, 2510, 5:01. Zulu UNSC Forward Base, Vigil. Moon of Telym 9. Outer fringe. The Forerunner gateway's hum reverberated through the shattered walls of the base, like the deep growl of an ancient creature waking from a long slumber. The chamber was in chaos, flickering lights, malfunctioning alarms, and the erratic buzz of a ship's failing systems. Zero stood at the center of it all, his figure silhouetted against the dark blue glow of the gateway's energy, which swirled around him, rising like smoke, intertwining with his body, as though the artifact itself was merging with him. Kelly 087 lay prone on the floor, her visor cracked, disoriented from the blast. But she still heard his voice clear and cold in her comms. "You are so much more than a soldier, Kelly. You never realized how limited you were." She slowly pushed herself up, her head pounding from the aftermath of the blast. Her suit's systems flickered back to life, the crackling comms interface providing the only sense of order in a world now descending into madness. She got to her feet, instinctively reaching for her rifle, but her weapon was still in its holster, too far to reach. The room swirled with energy. Zero's eyes burned brighter, his body seeming to pulse with the artifact's power, as if he were becoming the conduit for something ancient and horrific. His Mjolnir armor shifted, cracking under the strain of the Forerunner technology, morphing with glowing veins of blue energy, covering every inch of his body. Kelly could feel the pressure in her chest, not from the chaos of the room, but from him. Zero was no longer just a threat. He was a force. The voice was growing louder. "They will fall to you," the voice echoed in his mind. The Forerunner consciousness was becoming clear now, an overwhelming presence that crowded his thoughts. Zero's lips parted, but it wasn't his voice. The words that escaped his mouth were not his own. He had become the vessel. "I will awaken them." Kelly was still trying to orient herself. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the shadows of the room seemed to stretch unnaturally. Zero had become something more, something other. And in that moment she realized he wasn't just channeling the power. He was becoming its avatar. She could see it now. He was no longer just Zero, the creation of Oni. He was something beyond that. He was an instrument of Forerunner will, manifestation of their designs, a creature shaped by them. And the question that gnawed at her insides was whether he still had the will to fight it, or whether the darkness had already won. "Zero. Stop," Kelly shouted, her voice hoarse. She reached for her sidearm, but her hands trembled. Was it fear, or was it respect for the power he wielded? Zero turned slowly toward her. His eyes flickered with a cold, unfeeling light, and the voice that echoed from him sent a chill down her spine. "I am what you were always meant to be. You understand this, don't you?" A sharp, cracking laugh slipped from his throat, unnatural and unsettling. Then his gaze softened, and only for a moment. A flicker of something human crossed his features. "I don't want this, Kelly." But the words seemed distant, as if they were spoken by a different Zero, someone lost in the madness of what he had become. Kelly hesitated. Was that the real Zero still there? Or was it just another echo of the man he used to be? A fragment? A voice buried beneath the Forerunner will? She didn't know anymore, but what she did know was that she couldn't stop him. Not with brute force. The energy around him was too much, and she wasn't foolish enough to try. "We have to shut it down," Kelly muttered, eyeing the gateway, her mind racing. She turned back to Zero, forcing herself to speak through the fear. "If we can't control it, you think you can stop me?" Zero's voice was cold, almost amused. The power of the artifact surged, causing the walls to tremble once more. The lights flickered erratically, bathing the chamber in sharp, intermittent flashes of white. Location: UNSC Fleet, High Command, Earth Orbit. The communication officer stepped back from the console, his face pale. He turned sharply to Admiral Parangoski and Dr. Halsey, who were both standing at the war room table, looking over the encrypted data feed. "Ma'am," the officer said, his voice strained. "We've just received confirmation from Vigil. Zero's presence is anomalous. The Forerunner artifact has activated, and we've lost contact with the base." Parangoski's face hardened, and she exchanged a look with Halsey. "Containment protocols?" Halsey was already typing furiously, her fingers flying over the console. "We need to reassert control before he fully merges with the artifact. If Zero absorbs all of that energy, if he becomes the Forerunner vessel, then it's over," Parangoski finished. "The war will be lost." Back on Telym 9, Kelly looked at Zero, who was now staring at the gateway, as if waiting for something, or someone, to rise from it. She couldn't stop him, she couldn't even reach him, but Halsey could. Halsey had created him. Halsey had been his mother, and the only one who could pull him back. Halsey. Kelly spoke into her calm, her voice strained but steady. You need to talk to him. Now. Dr. Halsey's voice crackled through Kelly's. Helmet calm. I'm on my way, Kelly. Just keep him contained. Contain him? He's not a weapon anymore, Halsey. He's something else. But Halsey's voice was clear, cold, calculating. He still has a fragment of humanity left. We have to bring him back before that fragment disappears. As the gateway's power surged, Zero stepped forward. The walls of the base shook once more. There was a sense of inevitable collapse, the feeling that everything in the universe was shifting under his feet. The Forerunner power now clung to him, feeding off him, making him more than just a soldier. He reached for the gateway. Kelly's voice shook, barely above a whisper. Zero, please. But he didn't respond. He never would. Again. Chapter 8. The Last Choice, April 16th, 2510. 0547 Zulu UNSC Forward Base Vigil. Moon of Telym 9. Outer fringe. The air around Zero shimmered with energy, thick with the hum of the Forerunner artifact. The chamber trembled again, the walls groaning as if in protest to his very presence. He was standing at the heart of the gateway, arms extended, his body a conduit for a power that was not his own. The veins in his armor pulsed with blinding light as the Forerunner energy coiled around him like a serpent, but he wasn't fully aware of it anymore. He had become the conduit, the vessel through which the ancient power would flow. It was more than just a tool now. It was him. He closed his eyes. The voice was louder now, like an overwhelming chorus of whispers filling his mind. We are here. We are within you. We are... 1. Kelly 087 was still standing at the edge of the chamber, her rifle slung loosely at her side, her gaze fixed on Zero. She could feel the power surging, the thrum of the artifact, and it made her heart race. The space felt too small, too confining, as if the walls were closing in on them. She stepped forward carefully, her boots echoing across the broken tiles. Zero, stop this. His eyes opened, but they weren't human anymore. They were reflective, a mirror of the Forerunner light, swirling with strange symbols, each more cryptic than the last. I've already stopped, he said, but his voice wasn't his. It was layered with the same alien cadence that had filled his words earlier. The time for stopping has passed. This is the way forward. Kelly's heart clenched. She knew it was him, somewhere deep inside, but it was becoming harder and harder to reach him. Halsey arrived, stepping into the chamber with her characteristic clinical calm. She was flanked by a small team of Oni agents, heavily armed, their weapons drawn, ready for any contingency. But they were all still a step behind her, watching the scene unfold with caution. Kelly didn't take her eyes off Zero. Halsey, she snapped, stepping toward the scientist. Do something. He's becoming something else. Dr. Halsey raised her hand, silencing Kelly without saying a word. She walked forward slowly, her gaze fixed on Zero. Zero, she said softly, almost tenderly. Do you hear me? It's me, Halsey. The response was a pause, a moment, of hesitation that hung in the air, thick and fragile. Then, as if the artifact itself had taken a breath, Zero spoke again. I hear you, Dr. Halsey. His voice was still his, but laced with something older, something more forceful. But I cannot come back. Not to what I was. The words cut through Kelly like a knife. This was it, the point of no return. Zero had seen too much, and the Forerunner, power had altered him beyond recognition. He couldn't go back. Halsey's voice was calm, steady, but there was a rawness beneath it, a mother's desperation. You were never meant to bear this power, Zero. You were a soldier, not a god. Please, listen to me. But Zero didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed, staring beyond her, beyond everyone. as if he could see into the future, into a new era. "I don't want to listen," he said. "I don't have to anymore." A chill ran through the room. The temperature dropped, the air turning thick with the energy of the artifact. The lights flickered once more, casting long shadows on the walls. And as the power swelled, it became clear that this was the moment everything changed. A voice interrupted the tense silence, a cold, commanding tone that sliced through the air. "Enough of this." Admiral Parangoski's voice, crisp and unyielding, came through the comm system, her voice cold as ice. She had arrived with reinforcements from the UNSC fleet, far too late, as always, but she was here now. A dozen heavily armed Marines wearing full armor flooded into the chamber behind her. They were the final card, the last force that Oni could bring to bear. But Zero turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as if he had sensed their presence. "You don't understand," he said, his voice no longer sounding even remotely human. "You're too late. There's no stopping what's already begun." He raised his hand, and the room responded. The power around him grew colder, more intense, until it swirled like a storm of energy. The air snapped with the sound of static, and the very ground trembled beneath them. "Zero, please," Kelly shouted, stepping forward. But it was too late. The artifact's energy was too much for her to counter with brute force. She couldn't fight it, not like this. But Halsey, with her years of knowledge and understanding, did the only thing she could. She reached out, her hand trembling, but firm. "I made you, Zero." Her voice was low, filled with a raw kind of sorrow. "I created you to protect humanity, not destroy it. You can still do that. Please, remember who you are." Zero stood silent for a moment, his head slightly tilted as if listening for something deep within himself. His eyes flickered, and for a brief instant the humanity inside him broke through. A memory surfaced, the first mission, the early days of his training. He remembered Halsey's voice. He remembered being human. But then, the whispering came. Again, louder, more demanding. The Forerunner consciousness surged inside him, blocking out his human thoughts. The artifact pulsed with energy, and his form seemed to flicker for a moment, like he was not fully there. And then, something snapped. The artifact's energy surged outward, pushing the UNSC team back. Kelly was thrown to the ground, her helmet smashing against the floor, but her eyes stayed locked on Zero. His body began to shift. His face changed, becoming a perfect blend of man and machine, his features now an eerie reflection of the Forerunner's will. The transition was rapid, like a storm gaining momentum, the fusion of flesh and technology becoming something unrecognizable. The world seemed to hold its breath. Halsey's last words, barely a whisper, filled the air, tinged with grief. "I failed you." But in the next breath, a new voice, a new presence emerged. "We are the harbingers of a new dawn, the bringers of the next phase of evolution." Zero had embraced it. The Forerunner consciousness had claimed him. And now, he was their vessel. Chapter 9, Ascension and Reckoning, April 16th, 2510, 0632. Zulu UNSC Forward Base, Vigil, Moon of Telym 9. Outer fringe. The air in the chamber was heavy with energy. Zero stood at its heart, the Forerunner artifact pulsing violently. Around him, merging with his very form. His Mjolnir armor seemed to vibrate with the energy, shifting with alien runes, patterns that glowed and thrummed in time with the artifact's pulse. His body was no longer entirely human, no longer entirely Spartan. He was something new. He could feel it. The artifact's power coursing through his veins, mingling with the remains of his humanity, warping his senses. His vision had become sharper. The entire room crystal clear. Every sound echoed like thunder in his skull. His body was both weightless and grounded, as if the laws of physics no longer mattered to him. His mind swirled with ancient knowledge, memories of a civilization that had been gone for millennia, and he could almost hear their voices, guiding him, directing him, making him feel as though he were meant for something greater. But in the recesses of his thoughts, a flicker of his old self fought to remain. Was this truly the next step for humanity? Or was he becoming something far darker? For the first time in weeks, Zero hesitated. On the other side of the chamber, Kelly 087 pulled herself to her knees, her mind struggling to process what was happening before her eyes. The ground shook as the power from the artifact continued to surge, expanding outward. She had witnessed the change in him, but this was something beyond what she had feared. He was no longer just a man. He was a force. Her fingers tightened around her rifle, but she didn't raise it. Not this time. She was torn. The Zero she had known, the Spartan she had trained alongside, was slipping away. But something still lingered beneath the Forerunner presence. "Zero, please," she whispered, her voice desperate. "This isn't you." Dr. Halsey was still in the back of the chamber, her mind racing, eyes fixed on Zero. She had never imagined that her creation would evolve this far. She had always known the risks of her experiments, always considered the possibility that something could go wrong. But this? No, this was something far beyond even her expectations. "Is he still our soldier?" Kelly's voice crackled through her comms. Halsey's reply was grim. "I don't know." As Zero stood there, his form now more alien than ever, a low hum vibrated through the chamber, causing the walls to shake again. The Forerunner consciousness that had infused him was growing stronger by the second. Its will was becoming dominant, and the more he listened to the voices, the more they filled him with a sense of purpose, a certainty that had eluded him in his human life. He was a part of something greater now, something unstoppable. And then, the voice spoke again. The Forerunner voice. It wasn't just a whisper now, it was a command. "You are the vessel of our return, you will lead us." Zero's hands clenched into fists, and for a moment the power surged around him, a terrifying pulse that cracked the floor beneath him. Far above, in the UNSC Fleet Command, the transmission from Vigil had been sent directly to Admiral Parangoski. Her hands gripped the edge of her desk, her face hard with resolve. "Admiral, we have lost contact with the base." The comm officer's voice was trembling. "What do you mean, lost contact?" Parangoski's voice was sharp. "The last transmission? We heard Zero's voice, but it wasn't his voice anymore. It was something else. And now the artifact has activated, and we're picking up massive energy spikes." She took a breath, turning to face Dr. Halsey, who had just stepped in, her face a mask of grim calculation. "Halsey, what the hell's happening? What have you done?" Dr. Halsey met Parangoski's gaze. "This wasn't part of the plan. I created him to be a weapon. Yes, but this is something more. This is something. Zero has become the bridge between humanity and the Forerunners." Parangoski's expression hardened, but she didn't speak. Halsey's words sank in, and the reality of what was happening became clear. Zero was no longer a soldier. He had transcended his original purpose. He had merged with the Forerunner consciousness and, in doing so, had become something more dangerous than any human weapon. The Admiral's gaze moved to the tactical map of Telym 9 on the monitor. A decision had to be made, but it wasn't an easy one. Zero had become too powerful to fight. On Telym 9, the artifact's energy was overwhelming, cascading over Zero's form like a tidal wave. But there was a flicker of something else. Something that was pulling at his very core. A fragment of humanity was still there, buried deep within the flood of Forerunner power. Zero's voice cut through the storm of energy, echoing with the disembodied voices that surrounded him. "I don't belong here." For a brief moment, the Forerunner presence seemed to fade, and his voice was purely human again, filled with confusion and loss. Kelly 087's breath caught in her throat. This was her chance. She stepped forward slowly, her eyes never leaving him. She had to reach him. She couldn't just destroy him, not like this, not when there was still a chance. Zero. But then the artifact surged again, and the Forerunner power flooded back in full force, cutting him off. Zero turned, his eyes glowing with a bright silver light. "You don't understand. I am the bridge between humanity and the Forerunner. Legacy. I can't go back. I can't be the soldier you once knew. I am evolution itself." The ground beneath them cracked, and a whirlwind of energy surrounded Zero. His form flickered between human and alien, becoming an impossible blend of both. For the first time since the transformation, Kelly felt fear. The kind of fear that comes from knowing the person standing before you is no longer the one you knew. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a reckoning. In the distance, the sound of heavy engines rumbled across the surface of Telym 9. The UNSC reinforcements were on their way, but it might already be too late. Chapter 10. The Final Horizon, April 16, 2510, 0716. Zulu UNSC Forward Base, Vigil. Moon of Telym. 9. Outer Fringe. The sky above Telym 9 had darkened with the first signs of a storm. But the tempest wasn't one of wind or rain. It was the Forerunner power, a swirling vortex of energy encircling the artifact as Zero stood at its center. The air hummed, crackled, as though the atmosphere itself was charged with something unnatural, something beyond human comprehension. The UNSC forces were closing in. Admiral Parangoski, in a last-ditch move, had sent in an entire company of ODSTs, elite forces led by the ever-determined Kelly 087, to do what was necessary. But as the Marines set up around the perimeter of the chamber, their eyes flickered to the figure standing at its core, and a sense of dread gripped their hearts. Zero's presence had changed the battlefield. His form was almost unrecognizable. The Mjolnir armor that once signified his humanity was now fused with Forerunner technology, glowing with a strange, ethereal light that seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. His helmet, once a familiar sight, was now gone, his face a shifting blur of human features and something far more alien. Kelly stepped forward, her reflexes honed as always, but her heart weighed heavier than it ever had in her entire life. "Zero. Listen to me." Her voice was firm, desperate. She couldn't afford to hesitate now, not with everything hanging in the balance. "You are still in there. You're still one of us." Zero's head snapped toward her, his eyes now glowing with the unholy brilliance of the Forerunner consciousness. For a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, a brief moment. Humanity. But then it vanished. His voice was no longer his own. It was layered, a perfect blend of ancient wisdom and something far darker, more commanding. "You do not understand. I am more than what you made me. I am the bridge between man and machine. I am evolution. You cannot stop me." Kelly's stomach turned, the words cutting through her like a blade. She remembered the Zero she had fought. Beside the brother she had always considered family. Now he was something else entirely, something uncontrollable. Halsey was behind Kelly, her gaze locked on Zero, her expression unreadable. She had always known the risk, but this was beyond even her calculations. "Zero, stop." Her voice was calm but filled with an intensity that could only come from the weight of 1,000 regrets. "You were created to protect humanity, not to lead it to destruction. You still have a choice. We can find a way back from this." But Zero only tilted his head, his gaze softening, almost as though he were listening. But the Forerunner presence in his mind was too strong. The whispers, the commands drowned out everything else. Kelly's heart pounded in her chest as she approached, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the charge pulse grenade at her belt. "Zero, please." She could feel the weight of his transformation, the power that radiated from him like a gravitational force. But beneath that power, she could sense the humanity still flickering in him, a ghost of what he had once been. "I can't stop it, Kelly." Zero spoke again, but this time the words came as though they were torn from him. "Yes, you can." Kelly's voice was firm. "You're stronger than this. You don't have to let them control you." But before either of them could act, the artifact pulsed violently. A surge of blinding energy erupted, slamming Kelly backward. The ground cracked open beneath their feet, and the entire chamber trembled as though it were alive, groaning under the immense strain of the power that Zero was channeling. In that instant, Kelly heard Halsey's voice, clear and commanding through the comms. "We have no choice, Kelly. We have to neutralize him. It's the only way to stop the Forerunner consciousness from completely taking over." Kelly's blood ran cold. Neutralize him. Those words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. But then she looked up. Zero was standing at the center of the storm, his hands raised as though he were commanding the power itself. His gaze met hers once more, and in that moment she saw it. For a fraction of a second, the human Zero was there, the Spartan who had fought beside her, the soldier who had sworn to protect humanity. He reached out toward her with an almost pleading look in his eyes. But the Forerunner consciousness was rising, drowning out his will, swallowing the last remnants of his human self. "I'm sorry," Kelly whispered, her voice barely audible as she activated the EMP charge on her wrist. With a loud snap, a burst of electromagnetic energy blasted from her armor, sending a pulse that coursed through the air, striking Zero and the artifact in the heart of the chamber. For a moment the world stood still, and then it exploded. The blast shook the very foundations of the base. Sparks flew, the walls buckled, and the artifact flared in response. Zero's form twisted, contorted in agony, the power inside him spiraling out of control. For a moment it seemed as though he might collapse, the energy imploding in on itself. But then the energy surged, brighter than anything they had seen before. Halsey screamed through the comms, "Get out of there!" But it was too late. Zero's form ripped apart, splitting at the seams as the Forerunner power exploded outward in a wave of raw destruction. The energy storm blazed outward from him, a shock wave that sent the UNSC forces scattering in all directions, their armor crumpling under the force. Kelly was thrown into the air, her body slamming into a pillar as she lost consciousness for a moment. When she came to, everything was silent. The chamber was destroyed, the walls cracked and scorched. But as she staggered to her feet, she saw the shape of Zero, not as a man but as a horror. His body was no longer humanoid, no longer Spartan. It was a twisted amalgamation of Forerunner technology, a figure of light and shadow, a being that hovered between worlds, and in that form he was reaching for the sky, the last traces of humanity swallowed whole by the ancient power he now controlled. "Zero," Kelly whispered, her voice trembling as she stumbled toward him. But he was no longer there, not entirely. Chapter 11. Shadows of the Past, April 16th, 2510. 8:22. Zulu, UNSC Forward Base. Vigil. Moon of Telym, 9. Outer fringe, the smoke rose in black tendrils from the wreckage of the chamber, drifting upward into the dense, oppressive sky above. The storm had passed, but the devastation was far from over. Kelly 087 lay slumped against the remains of a shattered column, her armor dented and scorched. She hadn't felt this way since the first days of training, a strange combination of emptiness, loss, and disbelief. Her body ached, her head pounded, and yet there was something worse than the physical pain, the weight of the choice she had been forced to make. Zero was gone. The man she had once fought beside, the soldier she had once called brother, had been consumed by the Forerunner power, twisted beyond recognition. And in that final moment, when she had fired the EMP, she knew she had done it to stop him. But what had she really stopped? Was this the end of Zero, or had he simply become something else entirely? Kelly's helmet was cracked, one side of the visor shattered from the force of the explosion. She could barely see, but she didn't need her helmet's vision systems to know what had happened. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal. Something else. Something that felt like decay. Something unnatural. Kelly. Her name was barely audible, but she heard it clearly enough. Halsey. The woman who had created Zero, who had pushed him toward his destiny, knowing the risks but never fully realizing the cost. Kelly slowly turned her head toward the voice. Halsey was standing nearby, her own armor scratched and scuffed, her face etched with guilt and resignation. She didn't need to say it. Kelly could see it in her eyes, the same look she had worn during the creation of the Spartans. A mixture. Determination and regret, You were right, Kelly. Halsey's voice was hoarse, almost cracked. I knew we couldn't control him, but I thought we could contain it. We were wrong. Kelly swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. Contain it. Control it. The words that had defined the UNSC's approach to every project, every soldier they had created. But they had been wrong. And now they were left with the aftermath. She glanced down at her own hand, still clenched around the edge of a shattered piece of the column. Her fingers trembled. He's gone, isn't he? Kelly's voice was barely a whisper. We couldn't save him. Halsey hesitated before answering. No, he was lost long before this moment. Her voice cracked. What we saw, that wasn't just a man. It was a merging of two worlds. His humanity was buried under an ancient power, and the longer we waited, the harder it became for him to remember who he was. Kelly closed her eyes. She had known it. Deep down, she had always known that Zero's humanity had been slipping away the moment the Forerunner artifact had activated. But she had hoped, desperately, that they could find a way to reach him. Now it was too late. In the distance, ODSTs and UNSC Marines were gathering their wounded and assessing the damage. The blast had shattered most of the base's interior, but there were survivors. Not many. The loss of life had been significant. The ODSTs, trained for chaos, had taken the brunt of the destruction. But it wasn't just physical wounds that would need healing. It was the psychological scars, the lingering terror of what had happened here. Parangoski's voice crackled through the comms, cutting through the tension like a blade. Status report, Halsey keyed in her response. Admiral, the situation is contained. Zero is gone. The Forerunner artifact is dormant for now, but the base is destroyed. We've lost a significant portion of the personnel here. And Zero? Parangoski's voice was cold, distant. He was lost to the Forerunner consciousness. He was no longer human by the time of the final explosion. There was a long silence before Parangoski responded. I want a full report in 24 hours, Halsey. The rest of you, get back to the ship. We'll sort through this mess when you're back in the fleet. The transmission cut off, but the weight of her words hung in the air. Get back to the ship. As if they could just walk away from what they had done. As if this was simply a matter of cleaning up the pieces and moving on. Kelly stood up, her legs shaky beneath her, and moved through the wreckage. She didn't need to look back to know Halsey was following her. The two women, survivors of their own making, were left to pick up the pieces of a world they had shattered. As they approached the perimeter, a figure emerged from the wreckage. It was Parangoski, flanked by two UNSC Marines. She had been briefed on the situation, and her eyes were steely, unblinking. There was no remorse in her gaze, no hesitation, just cold resolve. What's the situation, Kelly? We've lost the base, Admiral. Zero's gone. Kelly's voice was strained, but there was a new edge to it, something darker. She wasn't the same Spartan who had come here, full of hope and determination. The weight of the failure was dragging her down, and it made her question everything she had ever been told. Parangoski gave a stiff nod. This is a failure, but it's not the end. She paused, her eyes scanning the ruined base. We'll need to decide what to do next. Halsey spoke before Kelly could. You can't control the Forerunner legacy. We've learned that the hard way. Her voice was steady, but Kelly could hear the tremor beneath it. She had created Zero, and now she had lost him. That was a burden that would haunt her forever. Parangoski didn't blink. We have no choice. Humanity needs to know more about the Forerunners. We'll move forward. The project will continue. Kelly's heart sank as she listened. The project would continue. They wouldn't stop, not now. They would learn from this, whatever the cost, and that cost would be paid in ways they couldn't even imagine. As the UNSC forces began their departure from Telym 9, the base was abandoned, the land scarred by what had taken place. But Zero was gone, his form nothing but a shadow, his legacy forever intertwined with humanity's reckless pursuit of power. The Forerunner artifact lay dormant now, its secrets hidden in the ruins. Yet even in its silence, it seemed to whisper, waiting for the day when it would rise again. And the question that haunted Kelly and the others was simple. Would humanity ever learn from the past? Or would it, like Zero, be doomed to be consumed by the very legacy it sought to control? Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.